As you may have noticed, Hurricane Dennis has been dominating the news cycle for quite a while, which means that climate change cultists are out in extreme force, throwing Bill Nye-isms in every direction. You have to understand, these aren't smart people. They're priests selling panic indulgences. If religion is the opiate of the masses, then climate change is the laxative of the retarded. And imagine, if you will, how stupid you have to be to watch a quote unprecedented primetime event focused on the climate crisis, featuring 10 Democrats who maybe want something from you, on the only network that can be known for shooting itself in the face with its own asshole, as well as losing to Yogi Bear reruns. Then the hard truth of the matter is that if you believe climate change is an existential threat to humanity in 2019, congratulations, you are the Neanderthal of contemporary evolution. I am, however, willing to entertain the idea that you just don't give a fuck about climate change and therefore remain ignorant of its origins as a long con, and its hilarious mutation from global cooling to global warming to, hey, guys, if we just call it climate change, we're never wrong. So if you don't know, then this video is going to make you smarter. You're welcome. And hopefully have some humour, and inject a big truth wiener from the hemorrhoid of Bill Nye-ism until it kills the climate change cancer that has infected the otherwise upstanding prostate of reason. Now, you already know that before there was climate change, there was global warming. But you might not know that before global warming, there was the 1970s settled science of global cooling, immortalised by a treasure trove of historical meme that culminated in a 1972 Ivy League letter to the White House that would lay the foundation for 50 years of quote-unquote scientists just flat out lying to your face in exchange for your money.
In 1977, the worst winter in a century struck the United States. Arctic cold gripped the Midwest for weeks on end. Great blizzards paralyzed cities of the Northeast. One desperate night in Buffalo, 8 people froze to death in marooned cars. Pat Bushnell was on the road that night.
Traffic just absolutely stopped. I was afraid of being stuck in the car all night long with the cold and the wind, running out of gas. And then what? I think that if we had to go through a real bad winter, just like we just went through, I think we'd have to think about moving someplace else.
Move where? The brutal Buffalo winter might become common all over the United States. Climate experts believe the next ice age is on its way. According to recent evidence, it could come sooner than anyone had expected. At weather stations in the far north, temperatures have been dropping for 30 years. Seacoasts, long free of summer ice, are now blocked year-round. According to some climatologists, within a lifetime, we might be living in the next ice age.
This is the Neanderthal ancestor of the same bullshit climate change propaganda that modern Democrats are still desperately clinging to in the face of dwindling attendance at church. This particular joke is called The Coming Ice Age, which was released in 1978, the same year as the passing of the National Climate Act. From Enthusiasm Skepticism Science, quote, although the budget remained modest, important bureaucratic infrastructure was put in place, including a National Climate Programme Office and interagency National Climate Programme Policy Board. Not long after it was established, the prevailing concern at the Policy Board switched from cooling to warming. Yep, you're understanding this correctly. Just 8 years after the fucking dumb kind of nerd secured legal authority and control by pitching a new ice age, when the same fucking assholes pulled a complete 180 when they realised they were holding onto a lottery ticket that would never expire. Quote, the 1985 Villach Carbon Dioxide Conference achieved a scientific consensus declaring that it was time to move forward developing a policy response to the warming threat. Following debate at this Climate Policy Board and elsewhere in the US government, it was eventually decided that a further assessment was required by an intergovernmental panel, that is, by what would be the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, as to how and why the same tards got from cooling to warming in less than a decade. Quote, at the same time that steps were taken to implement their own national climatic program, the US also lobbied the United Nations and its World Meteorological Organization, WMO, for a world climate program. The formal origins of this lobbying can be found in a speech by Henry Kissinger to the UN General Assembly in April 1974. In that speech, Kissinger called on the world community to come together to solve common problems. He specifically mentioned that science should be used to solve problems that science helped create. To his list of examples, he added one threat that was not caused by science, but that was entirely purely natural. This was the threat of climatic changes, and it had implications for global food and population policy. Through Kissinger's speech, the USA proposed that the WMO, quote, urgently investigate this problem and other guidelines for immediate international action. In the 1970s, Robert White was also the head of the US delegation to the WMO. This meant that during 1974, not only was he coordinating efforts to get a national climate program in the US, but at the same time he was following up on Kissinger's request at the WMO in Geneva. When White formally approached the WMO with a US proposal, the WMO was all but ignoring the global cooling scare. However, in response to the USA request, thus began a series of events that led to the WMO headlining the climate issue. In 1976, the WMO Expert Panel on Climatic Change released an authoritative statement that downplayed concerns about long-term trends towards cooling, to instead emphasize short-term fluctuations, including those that might be due to man-made effects. This panel then set about to organising the first World Climate Conference to launch the World Climate Programme. At the 1979 World Climate Conference, much concern was raised about the carbon dioxide warming threat, and the conference statement included an appeal to all nations that foresee and prevent man-made climate change. However, those in charge of the research component of the World Climate Programme refused to address directly the carbon dioxide issue. The WMO Executive Council supported this position each time it was brought to their attention. The WMO's reluctance to address the issue led Tolber at the UN Environment Programme to take matters into his own hands. In 1983, he commissioned the first international studies specifically addressing the issue. At its completion, he called the famous meeting at Villach in 1985, where the climate treaty push began. The promotion of the scientific consensus achieved at Villach by Tolver and others generated much discussion internationally. Importantly, it was taken seriously by the US Climate Policy Board and the US Department of State, where there was much debate about how to respond. When the matter was raised at the 1987 World Meteorological Congress, the US position was to call for another assessment of the problem by an intergovernmental panel. There is broad agreement with this view, and so the IPCC was born. Thus it can be seen that the cooling scare, linked as it was with the food and energy crisis, provided the impetus behind the launch of the warming scare, as it also provided the institutional platforms upon when the launch of that scare would take place.
If an ice age is coming, what can we do to stop it? Nuclear energy might be used to loosen polar ice caps. Sea ice could be melted by covering it with black soot to increase the absorption of sunlight. Dr. Stephen Schneider is a climatologist from the National Center for Atmospheric Research.
Can we do these things? Yes. But will they make things better? I'm not sure. We can't predict with any certainty what's happening to our own climatic future. How can we come along and intervene then in that ignorance? You could melt the ice caps. What would that do to the coastal cities? The cure could be worse than disease. Would that be better or worse than the risk of an ice age?
Don't be poor in a hot country. Don't live in Hurricane Alley. Watch out about being on the coasts or in the Arctic. It's a bad idea to be up on high mountains with your glaciers melting and losing your water supply. And if you're in a Mediterranean climate, you're going to have a fire season in the summer. It's really going to be a problem.
This is the late Dr. Stephen Schneider, and in this short clip called Schneider vs. Schneider from YouTube channel populartechnology.net, he elegantly demonstrates the point that it is, and always has been, the same moron farmers milking in their vote cows on both sides of the fence. This video caps a massive and hilarious list of links meteorologist Alan Watts has collected on whatsupwiththat.com. This includes articles and videos of all the 1970s global cooling voodoo magic being performed and ideologically reinforced by the same media goons that continue to grope at our money udders to this very damn day. In Watt's own words, quote, "Does the bullet point list for solutions to global cooling at right look familiar? It reads almost like some of the manifestos as we get from warming today, including the suspension of democracy, as the article in the Owassa newspaper clearly demonstrates during the 1970s. The media promoted global cooling alarmism with dire threats of a new ice age, extreme weather events were hyped as sign of the coming apocalypse, and man-made pollution was blamed as the cause. Environmental extremists call for everything from outlawing the internal combustion engine to communist-style population controls. The media hype was found in newspapers, magazines, and on television. Watt's list is truly incredible, including propaganda from the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, Newsweek, Time Magazine, and Time Magazine. Included is a 1974 CIA study called A Study of Climatological Research as it Pertains to Intelligence Problems, which the original poster prefaces with, quote, "In 1974, global cooling and excessive ice caused extreme weather and were a national security threat. By contrast, the intelligence in climate science communities are much more intelligent now. They now know that global warming and missing Arctic ice cause extreme weather and are a national security threat. But perhaps the best and most famous candidate for the true progenitor of the modern-day hurricane over leftist stupidity is a 1972 letter to the Nixon White House written by quote-unquote scientists George Cukler and Robert Matthews, in which they declare a global deterioration of climate by order of magnitude larger than hitherto experienced by civilized mankind is a very real possibility and indeed may be due very soon." Geez, I feel like I've heard that somewhere.
And we're like, the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change.
Shit, 12 years, we've got to do something.
We only have a few months left. Getting rid of fossil fuel is not going to solve the problem fast enough. A Swedish professor saying, we can eat dead people, but that's not fast enough. I think your next campaign slogan has to be this: we got to start eating babies.
Wait, what?
We still have too many people, too much pollution, so we have to get rid of the babies. That's a big problem. Just stopping having babies is not enough. We need to eat the babies, and this is very serious. Please give a response.
Thank you.
First posted to the Donald by user Chris P. Bacon, the now nearly 50-year-old letter opens as follows. Quote, "Dear Mr. President, aware of your deep concern with the future of the world, we feel obliged to inform you on the results of the scientific conference held here recently. The conference dealt with the past and future changes of climate and was attended by 42 top American and European investigators. Quick aside to note that it appears over and over that today's top investigators are tomorrow's biggest fucking lying morons on the planet." The letter continues. "The main conclusion of the meeting was that a global deterioration of climate by order of magnitude larger than any hitherto experienced by civilized mankind is a very real possibility and indeed may be due very soon. The cooling has natural cause and falls within the rank of processes which produced the last ice age. This is a surprising result based largely on recent studies of deep sea sediments. Existing data still do not allow forecast of the precise timing of the predicted development, nor the assessment of the man's interference with the natural trends. It could not be excluded, however, that the cooling now underway in the northern hemisphere could be the start of the expected shift. The present rate of the cooling seems fast enough to bring about glacial temperatures in about a century, if continuing at the present rate. With the efficient help of the world leaders, the research could be effectively organised and could possibly find the answers to the menace. Meanwhile, however, it seems reasonable to prepare the agriculture industry for possible alternatives and to form reserves. Cukler and Matthews, the twin tar pillars of Attenboroughisms, then closed with the threat of Russia. Just totally ignoring the fact that this letter, written by scientists, including the statement, existing data still do not allow forecast of the precise timing of the predicted development, one first wonders how in the actual fuck these heroes of fail aren't shamed in the public curriculum. Some well-deserved attention and humiliation would have prevented the global warming and climate change scam in their entirety before they ever raped your wallet. But the second, deeper question that becomes obvious with some thought is this: why did they switch from cooling to warming? And the answer lies in that same hilarious phrase in the Cukler letter, meh. Quote, "Existing data still do not allow forecast of the precise timing of the predicted development nor the assessment of the man's interference with the natural trends." Cukler and Matthews' one mistake, the entire priest class of fake scientists' mistake, really was to allow the possibility that global cooling was natural. Quote, "The cooling has natural cause and falls within the rank of processes which produced the past ice age. The key to the global warming pivot was the shift of blame from natural processes to man-made ones. Global cooling didn't logically call for increased control of human behaviour, but global warming, as Anthony Watts points out in his list, calls for controlling how you travel, how you do business, what you're allowed to research and study and then publish, how many children you're allowed to have, to the point where, as the original propagandists themselves pointed out, we will be forced to sacrifice democracy by the laws that will protect us from further pollution. This isn't a new idea. From the Mayans to the modern leftists, human beings of otherwise average intelligence and with no real abilities that can be purposed towards human improvement are still able to effectively enslave a superior population through their own retarded fear. Echoing Watts, does this look familiar? With America's 2020 elections coming up and ours just gone, understand that you probably already realised that we're all standing together at the lip of the proverbial abyss. Climate hoaxers, liberals, and even pretenders on the right are still profiting off problems, not solutions. Here is the solution. Get a fucking can opener into that deep black mush and mushroom stamp anything that isn't 100% MAGA. And if, while you're down there shredding evil with your flaming dong of justice, you happen to see an unusually large glowing light cuck hammer inflicting catastrophic damage on armies of screaming retards, well then say hello. and I will give you a fist bump with my offhand. Next up, we'll be looking at all the science that was used to actually get moving the global warming hoax. We'll be looking at their predictions and failed outcomes. And we probably won't have to go over this already proved science of Arctic sea ice reaching new record levels in 2016, the every year ever increasing numbers of healthy thriving polar bears, the science study on that from 2017, 2018, and continues still. National Geographic releasing a picture of a starving polar bear without ice around it and saying this was evidence of climate change. The apology from National Geographic for lying about the picture of the polar bear, but at the same time, after apologising, instantly saying it's still confirmation of what will come. The anger of the photographers at National Geographic for lying, the same photographers being angry at the cowardice of the people who said it was climate change, saying they never said it was climate change, but evidence of what climate change will look like. They didn't, they flat out said it was climate change, and our fault. The same photographers having to explain why as nature photographers they do not interfere in nature, and everyone had a go at them for not helping the bear. It was already dying, so the poor bastards had to actually point out to the virtuous leftist do-gooders who were enraged these photographers didn't cover the polar bear with a blanket or feed it, even though, as the photographers said, quote, none of which would have saved it. Go and feed it. Yeah. These photographers are going to go and get mauled by a polar bear trying to feed it for kindness. The lengthy explanation from the same photographers that this is a place that has always had ice disappear and reform each year, and is a place that elderly polar bears will be left to starve to death who can't make the journey back, and young ones whose parents were killed and can't fend for themselves will be left to starve to death or be eaten. Those same photographers having to explain that they weren't standing there crying, as the Washington Post had described, as they witnessed climate change in effect. The mainstream news and social media trying to discredit any information that didn't 100% confirm that the recent bushfires in Australia were climate change and man-made, to the point where the newspapers actually in our country said that there was misinformation being spread, but I know that's not true because I'm actually interested in the world and signed up to most online local papers, and I'd already seen these articles for myself from Australia. And if the suspicious arrest of 183 at the time that one large country is going up in flames, and all of them being climate activists, isn't concerning enough, then perhaps knowing all the facts that everyone keeps telling me about climate change actually come from the IPCC, who are properly called the International Climate Programme Policy Board, in an actual hearing where they have to actually be asked for the evidence that these fires were from climate change. I hope you enjoy their answer.
And this is the key sentence I want to just ask about. However, no studies explicitly attributing the Australian increase in fire weather to climate change have been performed at this time. Why wasn't that sentiment included in the explainer document?
So as we pulled together the document, we were trying to look at the high level, try to keep it concise in terms of its scope. So it's really a question of what do you choose to put in and not put in. There's a lot of other things we could have written in it.
All right, but I mean, just one quick follow-up. This is apparently the latest version of climate change in Australia. Is that still the position, that there are no studies explicitly attributing the Australian increase in fire weather to climate change?
I can have a crack at that if you want me to. I'm just having a quick check on it, yes. Yeah. But at this stage, there's historical studies around that, but at this point in time we haven't done any specific work.
I resent you calling me a denier. That is a word meant to put me down. I'm a skeptic about climate change, and I want to make it darn clear, Mr. Kenny's not a scientist. I am. He's the CEO of the Weather Channel now. I was the founder of the Weather Channel, not the co-founder.
And I'm glad you did, because I am addicted to the Weather Channel. I watch a lot of cable news.
Now, hold on just a minute. I'm not done. And CNN has taken a very strong position on global warming that it is a consensus. Well, there is no consensus in science. Science isn't a vote. Science is about facts. And if you get down to the hard, cold facts, there's no question about it. Climate change is not happening. There is no significant man-made global warming now. There hasn't been any in the past, and there's no reason to expect any in the future. There's a whole lot of baloney, and yes, it has become a big political point of the Democratic Party and part of their platform, and I regret it's become political instead of scientific, but the science is on my side.
I don't think we're going to come to a conclusion about the topic right here. What I do wonder, though, is when you see...
because you wouldn't allow it to happen on CNN. But I'm happy that I got on the air and got a chance to talk to your viewers. Hello, everybody. There is no global warming.
What I do wonder is when you see the government, when you see NASA, when you see other institutions say that 97% of climate scientists agree, do you think they're making it up? What I don't understand is how you square that.
Well, that's a manipulated figure, and let me explain it to you. The government puts out about $2.5 billion directly for climate research every year. It only gives that money to scientists who will produce scientific results that support the global warming hypothesis of the Democrat Party position. So they don't have any choice. If you're going to get the money, you got to support their position. Therefore, 97% of the scientific reports published support global warming. Why? Because those are the ones the government pays for, and that's where the money is. It's real simple. But that doesn't mean it's right. That doesn't make it true. That only makes it bought and paid for. The money goes in circles.
I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to try to refute you on the facts.
That's the truth.
I'll simply say that the vast majority...
Please stand back from this issue and let the two sides be on the air. There are 31,000 scientists who have signed a petition that says it is not valid, that my position is correct. And we'll keep battling, and we will prevail in time.
We have been polluting the earth for years, and we might actually die in a few years. Our world is already in flames. It's getting hotter. We can't breathe.
We are here because our parents trashed the planet, and it's up to our generation to save it.
My conscience couldn't handle the idea of bringing someone into a dying world.
I'm angry because this planet is dying, and the president of the biggest country in the world refuses to acknowledge that.
And I'm sick of the future that they put on us.
I am here for the people who are suffering and dying because of our country's decision.
Our oceans are choking with trash, and the 6th mass extinction is well underway.
This is a revolution.
It doesn't matter how much we're taxed if we don't have an earth to live on.
We need to do more instead of having a corrupt president who won't acknowledge that the earth is literally dying.
This is environmental racism, and we must acknowledge the issue.
We need to listen to our children because they totally get it.
Because every day of inaction drives more action from us!
Well, the Democratic Party is really going in a direction that nobody thought possible. They're going so far left, they're going to fall off a cliff.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. And yet, I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
Hello, I'm Severin Suzuki, speaking for ECHO, the Environmental Children's Organization. We're a group of 12 and 13-year-olds trying to make a difference. We've raised all the money to come here ourselves, to come 5,000 miles to tell you adults you must change your ways. I'm only a child, and I don't have all the solutions. But I want you to realize, neither do you. You don't know how to fix the holes in our ozone layer. I am only a child, yet I know if all the money spent on war was spent on finding environmental answers, ending poverty, and finding treaties, what a wonderful place this earth would be. Well, what you do makes me cry at night.
And yes, little girl, you should not be there right now. You should be at school doing what kids do. You should be at school drinking out of straws. You should be at school chewing on straws, eating double cheeseburgers, throwing paper on the ground. That's what you should be doing right now. You should be at school learning. Where is your mommy and daddy? They should be ashamed of themselves for exploiting you, taking you out of school just to fly you out somewhere to go talk at some climate change summit. That just don't make no sense at all.
Last night, CNN subjected its tiny audience to what it described as a climate change town hall. The thing went on for for 7 hours. An entire species of polar bear might have become extinct by the third commercial break. It's a long time. And yet, in the name of science, a few hardy souls attempted to watch the entire thing. Now, we can't say with certainty what happened to them, though, of course, they're in our prayers. But at least one of them lapsed into total unconsciousness. Watch this.
Write all our laws in this area. No more. No.
He was the lucky one. If he was sleeping deeply enough, he might have missed CNN asking Julian Castro what his administration would do to fight, quote, environmental racism. We're not making that up. Cory Booker, for example, he tried to reassure viewers that Democrats don't really want to take people's meat away. Apparently, he'd forgotten that Kamala Harris had just called for that.
I hear about it all the time. Booker wants to take away your hamburger. That is the kind of lies and fear-mongering that they spread out there, that somehow the Democrats want to get rid of hamburgers.
But would you support changing the dietary guidelines?
Yes.
You know, the food pyramid, what people are
Yes.
to reduce red meat specifically.
Yes, I would.
So Kamala Harris has been thinking a lot about what you eat, and she thinks you eat too much red meat, and she plans to do something about it once she's elected God.
Will you commit to implementing a federal ban on fracking your first day in office, adding the United States to the list of countries who have banned this devastating practice?
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So, yeah.
So would you ban offshore drilling?
Yes. And I've, again, worked on that.
Plastic straws are a big thing right now.
Yeah.
Do you ban plastic straws?
I think we should. Yes.
Banning drinking straws. I mean, it's just mindless and annoying. If you actually cared about plastic pollution, and you should care about plastic pollution because it's horrifying, you would punish China for dumping plastics into the ocean. But of course, no one on the left wants to do that because they're busy sucking up to China. But banning fracking? Now that's just demented. Our energy sector is the single most successful part of the entire American economy. It's one of the only things propping up our trade balance right now. It's been a savior of last resort for rural areas devastated by globalization. Kamala Harris doesn't care about any of that. She probably doesn't even know. When you're a soulless demagogue bent on acquiring power at all cost, details are not relevant. Father Buttigieg launched into a sermon last night that would have made Jonathan Edwards proud. Sinners in the hands of an angry climate god.
You know, if you believe that God is watching as poison is being belched into the air of creation, and people are being harmed by it, countries are at risk of vanishing in low-lying areas, what do you suppose God thinks of that?
You shudder to think of the torments waiting for you in Father Pete's Episcopalian version of hell. Imagine him lecturing you superciliously for eternity, wagging his little fingers in your face, bragging about his virtue. Father Pete, though, fears no such judgment. At the very same time he's yelling at you about belching poison into the air of creation, Buttigieg flies on climate-destroying private jets more than any other Democratic candidate in the race right now. How can that be? So you're not allowed to drink from a plastic straw. That's immoral. But Father Pete gets to keep his private plane. So no wonder rich people love climate activism. For them, it's all upside. It's not so great for everyone else, unfortunately. For poor people in the third world, it's going to be especially tough. They're not going to be allowed to have as many children as they would like. Watch Bernie Sanders explain.
Empowering women and educating everyone on the need to curb population growth seems a reasonable campaign to enact. Would you be courageous enough to discuss this issue and make it a key feature of a plan to address climate catastrophe?
Well, Martha, the answer is yes. And the answer has everything to do with the fact that women in the United States of America, by the way, have a right to control their own bodies and make reproductive decisions. And the Mexico City Agreement, which denies American aid to those organizations around the world that allow women to have abortions or even get involved in birth control, to me is totally absurd.
Oh, there you go. Sanders says it right out loud. The Africans are having too many babies. We're going to have to make sure those Africans have more abortions. We're going to pay for African abortions. We're also, by the way, going to have to control what people eat, how they travel and where, what they do for a living. We're going to have to control every detail of their formerly personal lives. We're in charge now of everything. That's the message.
Prompted this piece that someone sent to me. I thought I'd share it with you. It's called Growing Up.
Few commentaries on this global warming hoax have had greater relevance than this. I think I might send it to Al Gore. And it says this: to all the school kids going on strike for climate change, you're the first generation who've required air conditioning in every classroom. You want TV in every room, and your classes are all computerised. You spend all day and night on electronic devices. More than ever, you don't walk or ride bikes to school, but you arrive in caravans of private cars that choke suburban roads and worsen rush hour traffic. You're the biggest consumers of manufactured goods ever, and update perfectly good, expensive luxury items to stay trendy. Your entertainment comes from electric devices. Furthermore, the people driving your protests are the same people who insist on artificially inflating the population growth through immigration, which increases the need for energy, manufacturing and transport. The more people we have, the more forest and bushland we clear, the more of the environment that's destroyed. How about this? Tell your teachers to switch off the aircon, walk or ride to school, switch off your devices and read a book, make a sandwich instead of buying manufactured fast food. No, none of this will happen because, the piece says, you're selfish, badly educated, virtue-signalling little turds inspired by the adults around you who crave a feeling of having a noble cause while they indulge themselves in Western luxury and unprecedented quality of life. The piece ends by saying, wake up, grow up and shut up until you're sure of the facts before protesting.
And I want you all to know that we are fighting the fake news. It's fake, phony, fake.
Dan, you got the money. Okay.
I got a few, Bob, yeah.
Okay. You support Trump? You do?
Yep.
Okay.
I was one of the first endorsers, public endorsers of President Trump.
What are you guys going to do when our ocean level rises?
Thank you for asking that question. I have the answer.
Don't let me finish.
I have the answer.
Let me finish.
Well, thank you for the question. Yeah. Okay.
For the first time on Earth, we're changing the gas.
Now you're full of shit. Sit down. I'm going to answer you. I'm going to answer. Just
Dan.
shut up and shut up and sit down.
No way.
Sit down.
No. I got to finish my question.
I'm going to answer global warming.
All right, finish the question, then answer.
It's changing on Earth, and it's changing to CO2. What do you people with the money, what are you doing about this? Because
I'm going to tell you right now.
No, I've got children. I've got 21, 23-year-old children. And what's their future with you people with money?
If that were really true, which you believe, and let's just for a moment say that it is true, that means that the best scenario vis-a-vis global warming is about 10 feet raise in water. That's the best scenario over the next 40, 50 years. That's the best scenario. The worst scenario is about 100 feet. But let's just take the 10 feet. If the water on the planet is going to rise up 10 feet, that means the southern part of the United States is gone. England is gone. Most of Europe is gone. And I can go, most of Central America is gone. Okay. If that's the case, let's just take Florida, for example, which is one of the fastest growing beachfront condominiums on the planet. In the prospectus, when you invest, there should be, in the footnotes, if global warming is for real, they won't put it that way, global warming happens and water rises 10 feet, this investment you made is fuck all. Not one single investment prospectus written since 2000, this century, has alluded to global warming. Not one motherfucker. If it were really true, the banks wouldn't invest. The banks wouldn't finance. Not one motherfucking condominium. So the people that have the money, and I'm jealous of the Vice President, Gore, which Sally and I rode on a plane from South America with a few years ago. I am jealous he came up with a scam before I did. Because the financial institutions, the banks of this world know it's not going to happen. Otherwise, you couldn't get a goddamn loan in London. You know those 30, 40-year mortgages? The world will be over by then. Is Barclays Bank going to give you a motherfucking loan? With the greatest respect, ma'am, it's the greatest fraud that's been perpetrated on mankind this century.